So now moving on, we have one last presentation from our police chief, Andrew Bartolotti, and this is the annual statistics report. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Council President. Just give me a minute to set up the screen share here.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay? Okay, great. All right. So this is going to be a statistical snapshot of our anticipated annual report, which actually will come out during the first quarter of 2021 once we have all the statistical data available to us throughout all aspects of the department and how that relates to our position within the county and the state as well. But in light of a number of the recent auto thefts, bike thefts, and just generalized thefts that have occurred over the past this quarter, really, this statistical snapshot is something that we wanted to put forward, along with, as the mayor, as Council President had mentioned, a lot of the PSAs that we had done with the assistance of TV 36 as October is Crime Prevention Month. So what I'd like to start with, just to piggyback off Megan's report, is COVID and our response and operational impact that COVID had to us, because that does play into what our statistical operation is going to look like. So when I talk about a 12-week operational period, that's going to cover the 12 weeks between March 16th and June 3rd. And that 12-week operational period is something that we set locally within the police department. And that commencement date of March 16th is when operations within the police department took a turn. And we took a turn from our what we'll call our normal course of police operation business and refocused and restructured under COVID operations. While we were monitoring the COVID pandemic early on prior to the March 16th date, March 16th is really when we felt that an operational change was needed for the police department. So I just want to take you briefly through what that operational plan looked like, what it looked like administratively on the planning end. As you know, during that, roughly right around that time, our administration suffered a big loss with Chief Weck being affected by the virus at that time, which caused some operational shifting, if you will, within the police administration. Nonetheless, we gave ourselves a pretty tight timeline in putting together an operational plan because we felt that as of that March 16th date was a critical date for us to start moving forward, mainly to ensure a couple of things. We need to fully understand what this threat looked like to us from a police standpoint, from a police services standpoint, and from a law enforcement standpoint, and how that was going to affect us, not just locally within Summit, but in the surrounding communities and throughout the state as well. Then what we had to do is set some realistic expectations, and that was look at what our normal, what we call our normal police services are on a regular basis, and how we're going to prioritize those and either scale back or suspend in some cases some of those services so that we could focus really on our operational needs for a COVID situation. And that rolled into evaluating response procedures and instituting additional policies and procedures and amending policies and procedures to meet those needs. And I don't have the exact figure off the top of my head, but I do believe that we were somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 operational procedures that were introduced during this 12-week period. And those operational procedures included how we were going to respond to various types of calls, specifically within the medical services industry and our partnerships with local EMS and local fire. One of the big things that happened during the general consideration portion of our planning was the emotional implications. And that question was brought up today regarding mental health services and mental health concerns. And we knew that as restrictions tightened from the state level, and as we saw the numbers rising throughout not only our local community, the county, the state, but even nationally and globally, what kind of impact that was going to have on the mental stability of everyone involved, but also specifically how that was going to affect our personnel as police services in a crisis like this cannot be diminished, and we had to continue forward. One of the main aspects in that particular area that we focused on was keeping our personnel in a position to minimize their risk as much as possible, but also to minimize the risk to their families, as that was their number one concern on whether or not they were going to be effectively able to carry out their jobs. And then some of the things that we looked at outside the police administration, but transcended into public safety meetings, which again commenced around that March, early mid-March timeframe, was what mental health services were we going to be facing within the community, and how can we best provide that? And that was a collaboration between police department, the city's OEM, inclusive of first aid, fire, the city government, mayor's office, city administrator, and a big part of that process was the regional health department with Megan Avalon. So again, Megan, you've been invaluable to us throughout this process, so thank you. Internal measures, what we looked at there was our staffing impact, as I mentioned, and the ability for us to continue police services. But a big one for us with that is it was very simplistic for us to come up with an alternate work schedule to ensure we had coverage throughout. The big piece was getting the educational awareness around COVID-19, because it was completely brand new and unknown to all of us. So educational awareness, personal protective equipment was an ongoing and rapid learning process for all of us in the emergency services. And I thank Summit EMS and Summit Fire for collaborating with us and providing us the much needed equipment and training that we were after as well. External measures, again, collaboration with partners that involved ongoing meetings with county, state, local officials, locally with Overlook Hospital on regular weekly updates, OEM meetings throughout, and just keeping everybody informed and really bringing forward to the table the areas of concern that we had, because from across all disciplines and emergency services, there were many needs that needed to be addressed. And some of those resources or abilities to accomplish those things came from outside of our own agency. Public awareness was another big one, and that was touched on earlier in Megan's report and by members, comments from members of council with regard to collaborating with the city's public information office to get messaging out and get some PSAs out there. So I want to thank Amy Cairns for her diligent work with that and working with us through the height of that pandemic to get that out. And that was critically important as the governor's office pushed out new executive orders surrounding this. So situational awareness became a big one for us on how we were going to interact with the public on that. Some of the operational impacts, as I mentioned, we had to adjust how we conducted ourselves and delivered what we call regular police services. COVID operations for us over that 12-week period involved a reduction in staffing levels. The reduction in staffing levels came from the reassignment of all non-essential personnel back to the Patrol Operations Division. Essentially, what that did is that took upwards of 40 uniformed officers and supervisors from across all of our disciplines within the department and just front-loaded patrol operations to ensure that we had enough staffing levels to cover all aspects. And I'll talk a little bit on the next slide where that staffing level comes in. Reduction in records and administrative services was affected because of COVID operations. All of our non-essential civilian personnel, for their safety, the safety of their families, and to reduce the amount of employees within City Hall, were all transitioned to a remote work from home and hybrid inside the building work status. Some of the administrative tasks that we do that are non-critical were put on hold until a time that we could resume those. So as we came out of COVID operations in early June, the backlog of administrative services was pretty intense. And I thank our civilian staff for working so diligently to get us caught up to where we are today. Fleet services, that's not something you would normally think about as a major concern for the police department, but what really happened with our fleet services is because of the decontamination requirements that we put in place, the vehicle turnaround time for us was sometimes upwards of 24 hours. And that was across, we learned that had transcended across first aid squad as well, as they also experienced long turnaround times in getting their rigs turned around for service due to cleaning requirements. For the first time, we changed and we had a reduction of our in-person contacts and reporting. We did switch to telephonic reporting and contactless reporting. I bring that up because if we do need to revert back to COVID operations, we are not there just yet. We do not foresee having to go there, but that is all going to be dependent on where these numbers transcend over the next couple of months. But I do want the public to be aware that if we are faced with that transition again, contact and telephonic reporting, or contactless and telephonic reporting will come into play. We are beta testing right now an online reporting solution for non-criminal related matters, which we do get quite a bit of. In-person training, which is a regular ongoing thing for the police department, had to be suspended entirely, as we could not afford to put police personnel in contact in close proximities in closed spaces. And then ultimately for staffing levels, vacation time and all time off for all uniformed personnel was suspended for at least that 12-week period. We're just starting to catch back up on that, but knowing full well that that can be suspended again at any time. Perhaps one of the biggest areas of disappointment for us as we look back at this point in time is the suspension of all of our community programs and events that we run, especially during the summer months. We painstakingly looked at how we can deliver those services, such as the Youth Academy, National Night Out, Coffee with a Cop, and a number of the other community events and programs, specifically within the schools and in partnership with PAL and a lot of their programs. We ultimately made the decision to have to cancel pretty much all of those events, and the decision making behind that was not so much that we couldn't hold them outside, as we've noticed with a number of organizations like Reeves Reeve Arboretum and DCP have been able to hold those events. But our events were more hands-on, using National Night Out as an example, and it involved a lot of the younger residents of our town, which is where the health department has been seeing an increase in those numbers. The other concern that we had also was, as frontline first responders, we are going into known and unknown COVID-infected areas and dealing with persons that are positive for the virus and have been in contact with people that are a virus, and that continues to go on today. So we are constantly in and out of situations where at any given time, we may or may not know that we've been exposed, and to put ourselves in a position to possibly infect a larger portion of the community for an event that we handle every year. We just didn't see the risk in doing so. So we're hopeful that all of those programs will be back in short order as we work to get back into the schools as well for some of those programs. Some of the operational statistics that I want to point out, I felt were very important. Again, this is over a 12-week period where these numbers come from. Over 16,000 hours of operational readiness. And what that is on-duty officers covering the streets 24 hours, 7 days a week across that 12-week period, and being mindful that we did that with reduced staff. All officers were transitioned to advanced work schedules outside what their normal work schedules are, which required them to take more time away from their families and potentially exposing themselves even further before they went home. One thing that is not something that's a normal part of our operation, but this was a mandated reserve readiness, and that was about over 9,000 hours, where on a 24-hour basis, 7 days a week, within a 60-minute response time, if we were hit with an exposure within the department, specifically a patrol operations squad that was working at the time, our protocols at that time, when the virus was high, is the entire working shift would be quarantined, and within an hour, a reserve shift would be in place. So there would be no loss of police services to the city. That has since been scaled back a little bit because we are back to normal operations, but we are ready to institute that at a moment's notice if we need to. Perhaps one of the biggest ones is the over almost 63,000 miles of roadway patrol during that time. So when the rest of the state was in a lockdown, officers were still out there on the road. They were not locked down in the building. As a matter of fact, our building and all areas of the police department was completely locked down, even to our own personnel for minimal use at the time. So officers were out there on the road. That is a true and factual number of 63,000 miles of roadway covered, and Summit has about 80 miles of roadway altogether. Calls for service didn't seem to stop, almost 9,000, 5,000 of those being property checks, and the property checks are officers conducting self-initiated checks of residential and commercial and city building properties during that time. 911 calls, medical calls increased from where we were last year, and obviously that due to the virus. So again, that is officers walking into known and potentially known situations where COVID did exist. And another one that is kind of an excessive number from our normal annual operations is operational briefings. That is 252 during that 12-week period, and that was across all 7 days of the week at all hours of the day, with not just locally within the police department and within OEM and city government, but also regionally within our region, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the county and the state level as well. So we were getting daily briefings from the state on where this virus was transcending, and also, as we'll discuss in a bit, where crime was transcending during that operational period. One number that I am proud of is that once we instituted that operational time period of 12 weeks, we had 0 positive cases to our frontline officers. So that is all the officers that were on uniform, approximately 40 officers and supervisors going in and out of those 8,900 calls, over 600 medical calls, and not one positive case we experienced within our officers and within their families. So I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to kind of go through this a little fast because I know stats and bar graphs could be a little dry, but just to kind of give you an idea of where we are to present day, is we're roughly around just over 35,000 calls for service, where last year we were around 39,000. Now that drop is directly attributed to COVID response, not just across that 12-week period. We did start to come out as a state a little bit in the beginning of June, but we really didn't fully come out. Where I was able to determine that drop in number, looking back across the previous 2 years, is what you're not seeing in that 35,000 number is the self-initiated traffic enforcement details that our officers do, which on average, we should have been about an additional 44 to 44 and a half, 4,400, that is, additional calls under normal operations. So that would put us just about even to last year at this point. What did spike is that second bar, the 18,672 number. That is all the public service detail calls that we went on. And a lot of those calls picked up during the COVID operations. And that is calls that we get from members of the public that need assistance with non-criminal matters. And those, as you can see across a 5-year period, have just steadily increased year after year after year. Our motor vehicle accidents, again, we could attribute the decline to a couple of things. I would like to take credit and say that entirely it has nothing to do with COVID, but it does. We do know that there were a lot of vehicles off the road during the COVID period, but that has brought down a reduction. Looking and extracting out that 12-week operational period that we were talking about, where the lockdown orders were in place, our numbers still are down, but overall we are down 33% at this point. Same holds true for pedestrian accidents. We are down considerably, over 64% from where we were last year. And looking back over the last 5 years, that number on averaged out at about 13 or so. So we hope to keep that number extremely low. Again, through the Public Information Office, our internal social media person, and Hometown TV, we've been pushing out a number of PSAs, as it's not only Crime Prevention Month, but it also is Traffic Safety Month as well. And just as an aside, we've been notified recently that we have been awarded both a public safety grant and are on the verge of also receiving a impaired driving and educational enforcement grant that we've started as well. The next thing I'd like to talk about is just where we are in our what we call our Uniform Crime Report. That's the FBI statistical report that comes out on an annual basis. So you'll probably see that first quarter of 2021 for all municipalities across the nation. What this looks like is the eight major calls or types of crimes that the FBI tracks, state police tracks, and we track as well. You'll see that I want to explain a couple of these numbers. Obviously, the top three categories are the ones we always want to see: zeros across the board. We'd love to see zeros across the board in everything. But our homicides, our rapes, and our robberies are at a 0 for this year. I do want to just touch on rapes. Looking across from 2018-17, those numbers could look a little scary because we do want those to be zeros, but it's important through all of these categories to understand how this category, what it really incorporates. So rape in this type of reporting is not rape that we would normally associate it with where it's forceful. This does take in pretty much all sexual offenses, which nowadays with digital technology could include a lot of those as well. So what we do just at the end of the year when we're getting ready to finalize these reports, we validate whether or not something is factual or not factual. Looking down at the assaults, again, that's another one that needs some clarification because it could be a little scary to look at and say. But the way assaults get reported in this UCR is it's all encompassing. So it is everything from a physical knockout, drag out fight to something that somebody got into an altercation and it was a verbal altercation and somebody got scratched or somebody threw something and it bruised them, or even a complaint of pain. We'll have those numbers really kind of dissected more for our annual report once we get all those factors in. Burglaries is another one that I want to talk to. I don't have the breakout in the slide, but I do have some of the numbers for you. So if you just bear with me a second. Again, burglaries, it's important to understand how burglaries are categorized. And that is, for simplistic terms, the unlawful entry to commit a crime therein. So looking across the 12 burglaries that we have reported for Summit right now, they're broken down into an equal 6 residential burglaries and 6 non-residential burglaries. And on the residential burglaries, we're looking at 4 of those burglaries where somebody unlawfully entered a structure. Those 4 were done without force. They were done through open garage doors and open doors to the home, whether it be front door, unlocked front door, or unlocked back door. I'm going to touch base on the garage doors when we get to auto theft because they're all tied together as well. We did have one confirmed case of a forcible entry burglary where an individual smashed a window and committed a theft therein of the structure. Excuse me. And we had one case that was an attempted burglary. So even though burglary in the true definition of the sense was not completed, it does go down for statistical and reporting purposes as an attempt. Moving over to the non-residential burglaries, which accounts for the other 6. Again, 3 of these were open doors that were left to the business and somebody walked in. 2 were forced entry to commercial establishments, and 1 was an internal theft. And it's categorized as a burglary because the individual did enter during a time that they were not permitted to do so, but there was no force involved and items were stolen from there. The bigger ones that I really want to focus on in the next couple of slides are the larcenies, which are our thefts, and our vehicle thefts, because these are the numbers that are alarming. These are the numbers, if you had seen them in the news article, were reported on. And the percentage increase is pretty high. Thefts, larcenies and thefts, that's another one that needs a complete breakdown. That is an extensive one for us to break down, and we'll have that more extensively in the annual report after the first quarter or during the first quarter of 21. This includes everything. This includes shoplifting. This includes, theft from motor vehicles. This includes items that may have been stolen from a burglary, items that may have been stolen from a robbery. This would also include items that were lost and or stolen, basically unknown to the owner, which we do get a lot of. We do get a lot of misplaced items. The owner coming to report those items to us do not know if they're lost or stolen. Depending on the type of item, if the item does have a significant value to it and we are able to enter that information into the national computer, it does have to go in as a theft for that entry to be into a computer. So that number does come up as well. And if I did mention also shopliftings as well were in there, which I'll tie to a minute to a number of the bike thefts that came in. Bike thefts are involved in that as well. Vehicle thefts, that number is an accurate number. That is 26. This report was done with data from 2 days ago, so I do not know if that number is higher. I believe it might be 27. But what I want to do now is just take you right into auto thefts. And I want to take you into auto theft because auto theft, you're going to see, is really the area that we can do a lot as a community to prevent. It's also an area that when individuals come to commit auto theft, they're committing a number of other crimes that are making our crime statistics rise and increase. And that is specifically within our thefts as well, and the burglaries. So if I could, I'd like to go through just a brief overview here. You'll notice statewide, thefts are down 4% statewide across the state. Across the nation, thefts are at an all-time high. But in New Jersey, at the time of this report, which was this particular report from the state was dated about 30 days ago. This report shows a statewide decrease of 4%. But then you look at the core stat region, and what the core stat region is, that's an identity by the New Jersey State Police Regional Operations and Center, and that incorporates all the counties listed below that. And you'll notice that right off the bat, Union County and Morris County are the highest within the core state region, with Bergen County also high, but Essex County and Hudson County lower than they normally are. The asterisk next to Essex County is there because it's important to note that neighboring town of Milburn, although in Essex County, has seen a drastic increase in car theft this year as well, almost similar to what ours are. So while the whole county is down, you could see that the communities surrounding Summit, both in Essex, Morris, and throughout Union County, are all increasing. And in Summit, the staggering number here is an increase of 188% from 2009. In 2009, we've had 9 vehicles stolen. And as I pointed out earlier, in 2020, there were 26. So before I go into how we could prevent these auto thefts, I want to talk about what we're seeing in these auto theft trends, not just in Summit, but we're seeing them throughout our neighboring jurisdictions as well. And that is when these individuals come into our towns to steal these cars, what they are doing is they are literally walking driveway to driveway. We have video surveillance in Summit that I'm going to show you in a minute. We have video surveillance from throughout Union County and across Morris County and really throughout the state. And if you're so inclined, the information's out there on the internet. You will find very similar type videos from Ring doorbells and home surveillance cameras from throughout this nation right now. And what this is these individuals are going driveway to driveway, house to house, and they are simply just pulling on door handles. And you will see them pull on door handles, and if the door is locked, they move on to the next driveway. And when it is not locked, they jump in that car. And I will tell you that all 26 cars that were stolen in Summit this year, which caused our increase of 188%, were all left unlocked with the key fob or the valet key inside the vehicle. So we are making it extremely easy for these crimes to occur. The residential thefts that I talked about, the 4 with open doors, those 4 were tied to times when we know cars were stolen out of Summit. And if I believe that we had one incident where the car was stolen right out of the garage with the garage door open. Additionally, we had a number of thefts coming out of the motor vehicles, a high number of thefts coming out of motor vehicles for 2020. And again, all were tied to vehicles, every single one tied to a vehicle that was left unlocked. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at that it all starts with the theft of a vehicle. And we could look at those stats on the law enforcement side. We know those stats going back a number of years throughout a number of counties. A lot of your major crimes start with a stolen vehicle, as that is the perceived mode of transportation, or the ideal mode of transportation, if you will, for individuals committing these high-end crimes. So they are coming and they are looking for vehicles, and in there, they are looking for open vehicles. They are looking for unlocked vehicles. I don't have a specific slide on bikes, but before I move on to the next, which is a short video clip of one of the PSAs that we put together, I do want to touch on bicycles, because we have had a high increase in bike thefts during the month of September. Every one of the bike thefts that have transpired this year have also been unsecured bikes that were left lying. Most of them were left lying against a building in the CBD, and making it very easy for an individual to just pick up and walk away. We did make an arrest, if you're not aware, we did make an arrest a couple of weeks ago of an individual involved in those bike thefts. And during our detectives' interview of that suspect, he simply stated it is very easy to come up to what he classified Summit, Milburn, and the Chatham areas as he was involved, because nothing is ever locked and it's very easy. We were also able to uncover that, just like with car thefts, thieves that come in, this particular individual that was stealing bikes throughout those three particular communities was also committing shoplifting thefts as well, as part of his MO to blend in to the area that he was stealing his bikes. And in Summit, a number of those bikes were stolen at the CVS. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just play for you. It's about a minute long, so I ask for your patience, but I think it's an important PSA. You may have seen it, and if you have, I do apologize, but it is worth watching again. And if you haven't seen it, it's a great opportunity to learn from it. It's got some great information from Officer Sean Thompson, and it's also posted on the city's YouTube page, and I encourage you to share it with all your neighbors, because the best way for Summit to eradicate these types of thefts of opportunity is to all adhere to these lockup procedures of our vehicles, our bikes, our homes, and our property. You will see in a insert clip of a Ring camera that was captured individuals exactly what I was talking about. So let me play that for you.
I'm Officer Sean Thompson, and I would like to speak to you about automobile theft in Summit. Nationally, more vehicles were stolen this year than in any single year since 2009. And the biggest reason might have nothing to do with the criminals being cunning. Every car stolen in Summit this year, more than 25 of them, were all left unlocked with either the key fob or valet key left inside. All thieves need to do is find a car where someone has left the key inside, push the start button, and hit the gas. While Summit police officers routinely patrol 80 miles of Summit roadways and keep watch for the safety of our more than 6,000 residential properties and area businesses, we need your help in deterring auto theft criminals. Please do not leave your cars unlocked or the keys inside when unattended. Security footage provided by homeowners clearly shows actors checking car door handles of vehicles for an unlocked door as they move from house to house. Do not make your block an easy target. Never leave valuables in cars, and keep garage door openers out of sight. If valuables must be left in your vehicle when it's unattended, lock them in the trunk. These simple steps are all we need to eliminate vehicle theft in Summit. Please do your part and join us in keeping Summit safe. Thank you.
So I put this up here. It's a very simple tool, and I think it helps to have very simplistic visual training aid. And what this is a crime prevention triangle, and very simple, similar to how the fire triangle, if you're familiar with that, where you need three elements for a fire to take place. Very simply put, crime prevention we need for crime to occur, there must be three elements present, and that is the ability of the individual committing the crime, the desire of that individual, and the opportunity. And very simply put, if we work together in partnership to eliminate opportunity, we are going to diminish their ability and their desire, and they are going to move to someplace, other community. We're never going to eradicate crime in our nation. Sometimes the best we could do is deter it from happening within our own communities. And we do have that power. We have proven time and time again across disasters and times of major concern for the city, trying times for the city. 2020 has been that across all 10 months so far, but we do have the ability to stop this together. And just kind of going around the screen there a little bit, these are some genuine things that we're concerned about, where garage doors and packages are left and bikes are left out and cars are open. And as we approach the holiday season, there's going to be a lot of packages being delivered, specifically around the Christmas time. Do your best, and I encourage you to bring those packages within your home. Set up alternate delivery sites within your property if that's possible. Perhaps neighbors and family members, if you're not home, could be able to retrieve those packages for you. Also, when discarding of high-end products such as TVs or video consoles or bikes or so on and so forth, leaving them out on the curb, although empty, it is an advertisement to some to say, here's what's in this residence or here's what's in this car. Feel free to come get it if the opportunity exists. So it's very important for us to eliminate that opportunity. I'd like to end, before I conclude, but I'd like to end with this one slide. And this one slide is a 5-year look at crimes of opportunity that I've just talked about. Across 5 years, 74 vehicles were stolen from Summit. Every single one of them were unlocked with the keys inside of it. 66 bicycles were stolen. Every one of those bicycles were unlocked, left lying around in various parts of the city. And 173 thefts from vehicles occurred, and every one of those had their doors unlocked. These crimes are 100% preventable. No, we are not seeing across the state and our region that criminals are reverting back to what they used to do in older times, where vehicles were hot wired and bricks were thrown through windows and screwdrivers and other tools were utilized to break in. That takes too much time. These individuals know that in communities such as Summit and the surrounding communities, we make opportunity there for them. And it's really a partnership that we have to get to for everybody, not just with the police in the community, but community and neighbors amongst neighbors. Please get this message out that it takes a very simple step to just lock everything up. A number of our PSAs for it's a 9 p.m. lock it up campaign has gone out. You'll see that throughout the state as well. That's a partnership through the State Chiefs of Police Association and all the county chiefs of police associations to get that message out for a simple routine. But I want to expand upon that, and I don't want to misguide the public to say 9 o'clock's the time to do it. 9 o'clock should be the time, or 8 o'clock, whatever time you're going to retire for the night, to just double check. But I encourage you to lock everything up at any given point that you're going to be away from your vehicle. What I'd like to do is, let me just pull this screen share off for now and go back here. And before I turn it back over to Council President, I would just like to say thank you on behalf of the men and the women of the Summit Police Department to the entire Summit community for your support and your assistance during an extremely challenging year. At the height of COVID health crisis, our community responded with much needed personal protective equipment, emotional support, and an abundance of nourishing food. Shortly thereafter, our agency was shaken to the core when one of our officers was seriously injured in a head-on collision with car thieves fleeing from a neighboring jurisdiction. Without hesitation, the Summit community was there for us. A similar situation occurred with another officer just a few short weeks later. And yet again, the Summit community responded with such incredible kindness. I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge and thank Mayor Readiness, members of Common Council, City Administrator Rogers, fellow department heads, support staff, and city employees for your unwavering support and genuine concern for the safety and well-being of our officers. Over the last 7 months, our agency was catapulted into a series of events that have challenged us at every level, from managing a health pandemic, leadership changes, widespread power outages, civil calls to action, and much more. Throughout it all, your leadership and your support has been invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for this presentation. It was very informative and